Thank you, Philip, and good evening, everybody. I've made a few notes here just so I don't go over time. Excuse me. The night sky, the heavens, or the cosmos, however we name it, has for countless millennia been a source of wonder, enchantment, imagination, and careful observation by humankind. It has resulted in the creation of a wonderfully complex series of stories and an impressive body of science that now sees us out there exploring the farthest reaches of our galaxy. Australian Aboriginals have an ancient tradition of ritual song, dance, stories and painting, explaining the formation and nurturing of their world and the cosmos. This is a painting of the Seven Sisters, or the Pleiades, from the Central Desert artist Topsy Tulyata. In 2002, we were commissioned to design the Victorian Space Science Education Centre, which is one of 3 major innovation projects funded by the state government to refocus the teaching of science. Using imagination as a primary source of inspiration and insight, and the new field of space science to draw these together, immersive, scenario-based learning provides a richness and depth of experience impossible in traditional schools. Here, exploration of science's interdisciplinary nature extends learning to include decision-making, teamwork, leadership, and problem-solving, achieved through simulated missions to outer space and the planets. The brief was to create a showcase for innovation and creativity, reflecting the educational principles and symbolising the dynamism and inspiration of space exploration. Memorable learning environments were required, supported by sophisticated audio-visual data and communications infrastructure on a typically modest educational budget. The large and complex client and user group worked with the architect-coordinated team with ongoing collaboration from NASA, the European Space Agency, and RMIT, Victoria and Swinburne universities. The centre is also linked into a global network of space science centres. An early inspiration for this project was some of these photographs from the Hubble telescope of the formation of nebular galaxies and the formative forces, the awesome formative forces behind them. Just some early sketches of one of the sites that we explored on this area at Strathmore Secondary College out on the freeway towards the airport. The preferred concept at an early stage was this one involving 2 walls arcing around a centre, protective walls to deal with a noise problem from an adjacent railway, probably within, I suppose, 12 metres of the building. There's also a network, a whole chaotic network of freeways, flyovers and a creek that goes past. So these walls were responding to not only the campus at Strathmore, but also quite a complex surrounding context. A very early indication here of the arrangement of the building, the strong centre, the that doesn't actually work on there. The strong centre and the various activities arranged around that centre, the centre being a space of orientation, but also activity and connection. This gives a bit of more of a sense of the site. Terrible ground here. The building's in the top centre. It's an old creek, the old Mooney Ponds Creek, so there had to be very deep piling here to steady the building. the noise from the train I mentioned, and a campus that has mainly been designed by Simon and Frida Thornton. So there's a very strong architectural consciousness in the whole campus, which is very unusual for a public school, state school. And we looked at about 5 different sites on the land. Visibility was important. Also, how it sort of interacted with the rest of the school campus, because it's not just for the students of this campus. It's a facility used by students from all over Victoria and internationally as well. The building there, bottom left centre, in relation to the city. You can see the central space coning up out of the centre of the 2 walls there. And as you move into the school site, it's quite a long walk from the southern end through to the building, and this old eucalypt here is like a sentinel for marking the way. That's the entry, towards the entry there. Taylor Cuddly Lethlean were our landscape architects, and gives a bit of an indication here of the way they've extended the geometry and the energy of the building into the landscape. This long building here is one of the 1950s prefabricated schools with the concrete, very thin concrete veneer blocks. So coming in there, the tree in the centre bottom there, the library to the left, and the building sitting there on the edge. The 2 plans, you can see the various spaces arranged around the centre. I'll try this. That's not working. The purple at the top there is the lower floor. There's a deflected entry that you do a U-turn down a fairly dimmed corridor that then heightens the entry into the building. There's an Aboriginal painting right at the entry, and you walk into the orientation space that connects all the spaces in the buildings on 2 levels. Very high space with a skylight star at the top. Moving around there, we've got a theatre, a simulated inflatable space which is used for experiments on the surface of Mars, some research laboratories and change rooms. See there in the sections the very high internal space that everything revolves around, orientates around, and some idea there of the inflatable Mars space and the virtual reality theatre on the lower level. Some models, we work with models very frequently, often up to a dozen models or more per project, just with cardboard usually, but we also do digital work. And the beginning of construction, there's a combination of precast concrete, brickwork and steel. It's the entry point there coming out from the 1950s wing, moving across to the building. A lot of movement in the building that was intended to loosen things up, to give a sense of activity inside. This is a world that is kind of conjured from the inside, so that students come here and the external world is cut off, and they're here for a whole day, or sometimes for a week, off and on, doing these mission control trips to the planets. The entry point, that's that dimmed passage that leads up to the entry. This This is a painting that is directly inside the doors, inside the entry door, by Paddy Jopanjari Sims. It's called Yantrid Piri Dreaming and represents the lifting of the Milky Way into the sky. It's positioned right inside the entry, and I suppose as a reminder of the oldest living culture on Earth, and also it's a stimulus for a program that explores here astronomy, myths and legends, and the establishment of scientific investigation. The central space, it's sort of painted deep indigo, so there's a strong sense here of outer space, that sort of beautiful deep night sky indigo. And you can get a sense here of the interaction between the upper level and the lower level. The central space is a multi-purpose space which is used for lectures and screenings and has a very sophisticated multiple speaker system which is used for soundscapes. A research laboratory. Very few places in the building look out apart from administration. And there's a number of these apertures or annuluses that look out to the sky and the clouds. The virtual reality theatre, change space for the students where they get dressed in their spacesuits, moving through a chamber or capsule where they press buttons and the whole thing goes berserk with all sorts of sounds and colour, and then they're onto the surface of Mars to do their experiments, which is a very sophisticated floor here that can shake like an earthquake, be icy, be hot, and generally gives data on whichever surface of which planet it is. Mission control upstairs. The space laboratory. This building is a world within a world where theatre and fantasy support scientific endeavour through enchantment, inspiration and group endeavour. My favourite building in Melbourne. There's a lot of good architecture in Melbourne and hard to choose a favourite. Without thinking too hard, my shortlist would have to include the Maya Music Bowl, the Olympic Swimming Pool, Romberg's Stanhill, Peter and Dione McIntyre's River House, Robin Boyd's own house, Edward and Corrigan's Building 8 and ARM's Story Hall. But for tonight, I've chosen Roy Grounds' little house in Hill Street in Toorak, designed and built in 1952-53. I visited a number of times in the 1960s when I was studying with Roy's daughter Victoria. She lived in one of the elegantly simple apartments behind the house, designed along with the house as a coherent commercial development by the astute Sir Roy. My wife and I also had the last meal here with Victoria and Lady Grounds before they moved out in the 80s. As a young student, I found it enchanting, intensely affecting, and deeply memorable. It seemed to heighten the experience of the passing day, and yet have a calm and a silence outside time. It's small, barely 12 by 12 or even smaller, intimate and monumental at the same time. Simple, yet powerful in its dynamic combination of glazed circular courtyard centred within the square of the brick walls. The broad upturned eave of the roof floats over a continuous ribbon of windows above head height, connecting those inside with surrounding foliage, sky and passing clouds. It occurred to me as I was putting this presentation together that our Space Science Centre is a variation on this ancient spatial ordering principle, as is the National Gallery of Victoria. I like to see that principle having infinite variations to explore. all share the potential to stir and connect us with our own interior space, our souls, and with the awesome exterior space of the living cosmos. Thank you very much.